what is percent and how do we calculate it? That's what this video is about. I like to think of percent as sort of a bar that fills up, and it can go from 0% to 100%. 100% means it's full, 0% means it's empty. So we know if that bar was half full, then that would be about 50%. Correct? And if that bar was more full, like something like this, we would call that maybe 75%. And if it was even less, so if it was down to here, we might call this 25%. And of course, there's everything in between. So we know 50% means half full, 75% means 3/4 full, 100% means it's full. So let's look at an example. Say you want to buy a new pair of shoes, and let's say that pair of shoes costs $80. So that's the full price of the shoes. So we know if we had 0% of that, it would be down here at $0. Now, let's say we had $60. So let's put that here. Let's put a $60 here. If we had $60, what percent of the total price would we have? So the way we would figure this out is we write it as a fraction. It would be $60 out of $80. And remember, fractions are just another way of doing division. So if I do 60 divided by 80 on my calculator, I get 0.75. Is that the percent, 0.75? Well, not exactly, but it is closely related. We have to actually think about what percent means. Per is like saying out of, and cent, you might know in French, cent is 100. So percent literally means out of 100. So this right here is not how much we have out of 100. That's the decimal. So to find out how much it is out of 100, we need to multiply this by 100. When we do that, we get, if you do that on your calculator, 0.75 times 100, we get 75%. You can also just move the decimal place over twice. So if we had $60 out of the $80 that the shoes cost, we would have 75% of the total cost of the shoes. And this is how we basically can turn a fraction into a percent. So we have three things here. Number one, we have the fraction, right? That's this part of it. Here we have what's called the decimal version. And the decimal is what you get when you divide the fraction. And last, when we multiply the decimal by 100, we have the percent. So these three things are sort of closely related together. One last thing, always keep in mind when we're doing the fraction, we always want to do the part, like how much we have over the total, like the total we need, right? So that's what the fraction is. It's the part over the total. So let's try another example. The example here, the Raptors played 82 games last season and won 59 games. What percent of games did they win? So what I would recommend for this, watch me do the answer, just watch it, then pause the video and copy down the solution. It's better to pay attention instead of just trying to copy while I talk. So the Raptors played 82 games last season and won 59. So if I were to write that as a bar, sort of like a bar graph like this. So in total, they played 82 games, right? So 0 would be down here. That's if they played 0 games. That's if they played 82 games. So remember, this corresponds to 0%, and this would be 100% of games played. Now, we know that they won 59 games, and 59 is going to be somewhere in here. We don't know exactly where it is, but it's something like this. So if they won 59 games, the bar is sort of, maybe it's a little bit, it's around half full or a little bit more than half full. So we want to know if this is 59 games, we want to know what percent that is, right? So we can probably guess just by looking at this. at this, we can say it's probably going to be around 50%, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, right? So how do we do it? Well, we're actually going to do it in the same way that we did the previous question. We find the fraction, then we find the decimal, then we find the percent. So they won 59 out of 82 games. So I can do that decimal on my calculator. But remember what I'm going to do is I'm going to end up multiplying it by 100 once I have that decimal. So I don't actually need to show that step. I can just show multiply by 100 because my calculator should be able to do this whole thing at once. So I can do 59 divided by 82 on my calculator times 100, and it should give me the answer of 71.95%. So if you see that, that's pretty good. Usually when we deal with percent, though, we like to round to the nearest whole number, the whole percent. So what would you round that to? Would you leave it as 71% or round to 72%? Well, notice how the next digit here is a 9, so that's very, very close to 72%. So we would say that this is 72%. So again, what that means is it means the Raptors won 72% of the games, right? So that makes sense because we said it's sort of going to be maybe around 50, but a little bit more, right? 59 is a little bit more than half of 82, so it makes sense that it's in that ballpark. So that makes sense. That is the correct answer. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to try this next question yourself. So pause the video, try it here, unpause when you're done, and I will reveal the solution to you. So hopefully you tried it yourself, and this is the solution that I got, 10%. Notice how when I showed the bar graph again, the bar graph might be helpful to make sure you get, a reasonable answer. It's always a good idea to write it. So when I did it, I saw that 115 isn't very much of the 1,100, right? It's just a little bit. So we would expect the percent to be pretty small. And when we calculated the answer, it was 115 of the 1,100 students. So 115 divided by 1,100 times 100, which gave me 10.45%. And 10.45 is closer to 10 than it is to 11. So we could say that this is about 10% of students ride their bike to school. So what I have for you here is 4 more questions. And I want you to really give these questions a good shot. Okay, try them yourself. Struggle with them a little bit. Some of them are a little bit more difficult than others, but give them all a try. When you think you have answers, you can check them. The answers are on the top of the next page. You can check them yourself. Or you can unpause the video and I will reveal the solutions to each one of these. Okay? All right, pause it now and try it. Okay, here are the solutions to these 4 problems. The first 2 were pretty straightforward. You just needed to figure out what the part of the total was. So the first one was 26 out of 35. The second one was 855 out of 1,100. The third one is a little bit trickier because you have to pay close attention. Remember, the part is the thing that there's a part of, and then the total is like how many there are in total. So it should be 18 over 1024. It's easy to mess that up and switch it around, but the 18 goes on the top. And when you do this, you get 1.76%, which is close to 2%. So not very many of the students in the school are twins, but there are quite a few of them. And the last one's a little bit trickier because you have to be careful here. If you get 28 out of 25, that means you got more than all the questions correct. And this might have happened to you before if you got some bonus marks on a test or a quiz or an assignment. So when you do this, 28 is how many you got right out of a total of 25. And when you do the math, it comes out to 112%. Is it possible? Is it okay for a percent to be bigger than 100%? Absolutely. And if you think about our bar graphs that we make, so I can think about this. Down here we have a bar graph. And if the test is out of 25, so it goes from 0 to 25, and that goes from 0% to 100%, right? If you get all of those questions right, plus an extra 3 questions right, so it's like you're making the bar even longer. We've got an extra, so if this will go up to 28, it's like we've earned an extra 12% to get 112%. So it is possible. It's possible to have a percent higher than 100. Okay? So that's it. You get 112% on that assignment. The next part is, can we calculate a percent of a number? So for example, if the problem says, what's 20% of 400? Well, we're going to start by drawing my bar. I always like to draw the bar. Helps us visualize what's going on. So this bar goes, we know it's 0% to 100%, 100% if it's full. And we know the total here is $400. So it's saying like we have a total of $400. What's 20% of that? So the $400 is going to go here, and we know there's going to be $0 down here. It's always 0 on the left-hand side. So what's 20%? Well, 20% is something, it's not very much, right? Out of the 100%, something down here, like this, 20%. And now we want to know what number this corresponds to, how many dollars 20% corresponds to. And the way we're going to do this is sort of like opposite of what we did in the previous questions. Because in the previous questions, we were trying to find the percent. Now we got to try to find the number. So let's look at what we did here. When we had a part over a total, we divided, and then we multiplied the answer by 100. So if we were to start with the percent and we wanted to work backwards to find out what the part is, we do the opposite. So just making a little note off to the side here might help us out. If we start off with the percent, right? So let's use the previous example again. So 75%. If we wanted to turn that back into a decimal, that would be the first step. So we want to turn that into a decimal. So if this is the percent, we want to turn that into a decimal. And in order to do that, we need to divide by 100, which gives us 0.75. So see, that's just doing the opposite. Here we multiply by 100 to get the percent. So to do the opposite, we've got to divide by 100. And then, in order to get the part, which is what we're trying to do, in this case, we divided. What's the opposite of division? Well, it's multiplication. So all we do is we multiply by the total. So that's basically what we're going to do here. We're going to multiply by the total. So in the total in this previous example was $80. So we're going to times it by 80, which gives us 0.75 times 80 gives us $60. So you see, we got our part back, $60. So that's the process we're going to follow here. We're going to start with the percent, turn that into a decimal, and then multiply by the total to find the part. So let's do it. So here, 20% as a decimal, we're going to do 20%. We're going to divide that by 100% to get that as a decimal, right? And when we do that, we're going to get 0.2. You can do that on your calculator if you want. 20 divided by 100 is 0.2. And then we want to multiply by the total, which in this case was 400. When we do that, we get, what do we get? 0.2 times 400 is $80. So there we go. We found the part. It was $80. So here, what goes here is $80. And that makes sense because $80 is just like a little bit of the 400, right? It's not too much. So one more time, just to refresh your memory, in order to find the percent of a number, right? If we want 20% of 400, all we need to do is find the decimal of that percent. So just divide by 100, or if you know how to do it, you can move the decimal place over twice, right? To find 0.2, and then multiply it by the total, which is 400. So, same as before. I want you to pause the video here, try the your turn, see if you can find out what 70% of 320 students is. When you're done, unpause it and I will reveal the solution. Okay, pause now. So there we go. The solution that you should have got was 224 students. So if we want to know what 70% of the students were, it would be 224. And if we look at this, we know 100% of the students is 320. 70% of them means most of them. So it makes sense that this is 224 of the 320 students. Okay, there we go. So now what I want you to do is I want you to try these 6 questions down here. And again, you'll notice the answers or the solutions are at the very bottom of the page. So I'm not going to write the full solutions out for these ones because the answers are at the bottom. So give your best shot. If you have trouble with these questions, if you're really stuck on them, make sure you ask your teacher in class, but really give them a good shot. Okay? Good luck.